Hey guys, welcome to the Daily Word Bible Study, a plain and simple book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse study through the entire Bible. We are in the book of Zechariah, and we're going to be getting into Zechariah 14. And a lot of prophecies, we covered a lot of these prophecies in our journey through the Bible. If you will remember, because right now we're in the last section of the Old Testament. And actually, we're in just two books from completing the entire Bible, our journey through the Bible. And so the Old Testament. Now, the last section was the writings of the prophet. They are broken up into both what's called the minor and major prophets. We did not study these books as they are arranged in our Bibles. We studied them chronologically. In other words, what's best in terms of the dating. And the reason why I did that is because prophetically, you follow a prophetic timeline. So in other words, what God was saying. So if you study the books, and again, this is not a right or wrong kind of situation here. If you study the Bible in the order that was arranged by the scholars, okay, by the translators, you come with Isaiah first, and because it's a major prophet. And also, it is the earliest of the major prophets. So we went back to the earliest of the prophets, the writing of the prophets. We went back and we studied those books, which was what? Here, Hosea and Joel. And the reason why is because that dating about 200 years before the Babylonian exile, you get to feel, you get the flavor of what was going on during that time, and then the progression of prophecy. So that by the time we get to Jeremiah, you see the prophetic voice now is you had the warnings up until this time. Now here's the doom. Then when we go into Ezekiel and Daniel, you see the devastation of Israel and your life as you now know it, which is exile. And now as we're studying in like Zechariah, these are the post-exile, okay, the post-exile books. So that's why we studied in that fashion. And that's important because now Zechariah is looking past the Babylonian exile. Now, here's this picture. If you remember, I brought this up. Just kind of an artist's rendition. This dream was given to Nebuchadnezzar in Daniel chapter 2. So at the time, this was I think Daniel's first or second year in which he was exiled. So you had the Babylonian king or the Babylonian Empire. So by the time we get to Daniel chapter 9, we're in the Persian kingdom. Daniel chapter 11, where he was prophesying of the Greece and Roman Empire. And right now, prophetically, we're waiting for the feet in the iron of clay. And in Daniel chapter 2, he says, in the days of these kings is when Jesus is going to set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed. And remember, as the kingdom was given, let me bring another image here. This is the one I use the most, but the feet of iron and clay, as you can see here, in the days of these kings, he said, Jesus will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed. The rock that's pictured here, not made with hands, strikes the image, which is the human form, representing human government, that mankind, time on this earth, and then when God says that time is over, this rock, which represents the kingdom of Jesus, strikes this image at the end of time, and pulverizes this image. So that's the prophetic timeline right there. Strikes it at the end. Okay? And that's important to understand because right now, that's what we're waiting on. We're waiting on uh, well, what's next to happen. We're not waiting on it, but then what's next to happen or to arise would be the feet of iron and clay. Okay? Now, um, uh, let's see here. Let's go to our book here, Zechariah chapter 14. And he says, a day of the Lord is coming. And I'm going to stop there for a moment because I want to also define some other terms. So when we talk about the day of the Lord, that is not the same as the second coming, right? Or the return of Jesus. Now, the day of the Lord is a period of time when God is pouring out his wrath, concluding with the second coming of Jesus. However, Jesus is the one who's executing the judgment. So the day of the Lord is the second, is a period of time at the end of time as God decrees, in which this day of the Lord is this period of time in which he will be pouring out his wrath, okay, his wrath upon mankind. Okay, so the day of the Lord is when he's pouring out his wrath upon mankind. Okay, now, so he says, a day of the Lord is coming when your plunder will be divided in your presence. And this is, I will gather all nations against Jerusalem for battle. Now stop. So this is a major prophecy again. That's common throughout the Old Testament prophecies. At the end of days, okay, he says, I will gather all nations against Jerusalem for battle. This hasn't happened yet. I'll also say this, that there are some people who believe that the nation of Israel, when it was gathered, when it became a nation in 1947, was a fulfillment of prophecy. Now, one of the problems with people in their interpretations, and I could criticize this because we have scripture and end time prophecies or eschatology, the study of end times. End time prophecy is simple, as with all scripture is simple. God did not give us the revelation, the Bible, and made it difficult to understand. And that's he did not give us that so we could not understand it. That is a misnomer from people. God did not give us the prophecy so that we could not understand it. He gave the revelation so we could understand it. And he gave it to us in plain, simple language. Okay? It's plain and simple. The problem is people who, for whatever reason, will approach scriptures and start adding and taking stuff out. Okay? So prophecy is kind of you can say the ingredients, the contents of the Old Testament prophecy. Pretty much is centers around what God is doing with Israel. So that's these different components of prophecy. You have God's plan and purpose for mankind to when he decides and decrees that man's time on earth is up. During this time, what has happened is sin and ungodliness and wickedness increases and increases and increases. Thus, the day of the Lord is this time when God will judge the earth. Now, you also have this period of time where the gospel is preached. Jesus dies on the cross. The gospel is preached. The gospel is preached to the ungodly world. the world continually grows ungodly, more ungodly, more ungodly, more wicked, more wicked. While God is also gathering people through the gospel. Okay, then you can get into what's called the rapture of the church. We're not going to get into it here because these prophecies in and of themselves don't do with the rapture of the church. But it is the when Jesus removes his church from the earth. Now, all of Bible prophecy, as I said, is not hard to understand. It is very simple. It's easy to understand, but it is exhaustive, which we do not have time in this video. I'm doing another series on my YouTube channel, VP the Bible Perspective, where we're doing a study on the rapture with a focus on end times, with a focus, actually it's eschatology, with the title is the rapture, but we are exploring all the aspects of prophecy, whether it's Jerusalem, the church, and how the rapture fits into that. We just don't have the time here. So the idea is that the debate is, when will that rapture happen? Okay, so there are those that believe the rapture will happen before the tribulation period begins or before the day of the Lord begins. There are those that believe that the rapture is going to happen at the during the middle of the tribulation period, and then there are those that believe that the rapture is going to happen at the end of the tribulation period. Okay, again, we're not going to get into that, but however, there's going to come a time when Jesus will remove his church. And then the day of the Lord is what he's talking about here, which is also commonly spoken of in prophecy. And what is interesting about this day of the Lord, notice what he said: I will gather all nations against Jerusalem for battle. We see this in Ezekiel. We see this in Daniel. We see this in Jeremiah. I think we see this also in Joel, these prophecies. Okay. When you read the book of Revelation, chapters 6 through 19, you see this day of the Lord unfolding. Okay. At the end of it, this is where you see all nations being gathered together. Notice, against Jerusalem. And then there are some who believe that this already has come to pass in AD 70. But notice, all nations wasn't gathered together at Jerusalem for battle in AD 70. So the problem with, again, understanding prophecy is it is simple. It's just exhaustive. So there's a lot of it that you have to read to get the full picture. And that's all, to get the full picture. You cannot construct a prophecy. You cannot construct a prophecy or a theological view of prophecy just on a few verses. You have to look at all of them. And here is a major component of this right here that Zechariah is giving us, along with, again, Matthew 24, the book of Revelation, Daniel, all of them. So what's going to happen at the end days? Now, started to say this. There are people who believe, who believe that in 1947 Jerusalem became a nation. Well, I cannot in any way see that happened. And though it became a nation, that wasn't a fulfillment of prophecy. And one reason why is because when God gathers Israel back into the land, Jesus said this in Matthew 23. Let me read this here. So again, this is a part of the picture. You know what? While I'm back here, let's look at Joel for a moment. Joel chapter. Now look at this. Okay, so remember we talked about the day of the Lord? This is Joel. Chapter 1, look at this here. Verse 15 says, woe because of that day, for the day of the Lord is near and will come as devastation from the Almighty. Okay, so keep this in mind. What is always being described, this is specifically from the Lord. In other words, these are not natural occurrences. These are not something that happens that, we have a hurricane or a tornado. All right. I think there's another one in Joel here that I want to see. Okay. Um, verse 3 says, yes, I want you to see this one. Yes, in those days and at that time, when I restore the fortunes of Judah and Jerusalem, I will gather all the nations and take them to the valley of Jehoshaphat, and I will enter into judgment there because of my people, my inheritance, Israel. The nations have scattered the Israelites in foreign countries and divided up my people. They cast lots for my people. Now, go back, and I want you to see. Notice he says, I will gather all the nations, right? So, I want to read one more verse before I get back. You know what? I'll just tell you about this verse because this verse right here it's good for what we're reading. In Matthew 23, at the end of Matthew 23, Jesus rebukes Jerusalem and says, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how often I would wanted to gather you as the hen gather her chicks on her wing, but you were not willing. He said, but you were not willing. He said, see, the days are coming when your house is left to you desolate. I'm paraphrasing this because I'm butchering the quote here. He says, for you will not see me again until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. But notice, and we don't want to look at this here in conjunctions, he says, I will restore the fortunes of Jerusalem. I will gather all nations and take them to the valley of Jehoshaphat. So this period of time here, when we talk about the day of the Lord, he says, your plunder will be divided in your presence. And he says, I will gather all nations against Jerusalem for battle. So that's important to what is going on or what will happen in the end time, where Israel is concerned. Okay, where Israel is concerned. This is a end time event, an event that will happen in the end times. Okay, and so I'll come back to this in the next video and pick this up here because again, I wanted to give some background to this because we're not going to get or do a deep dive here, but you can see there's a lot to put together, but the theme is always the same. So at where we are now in terms of what we're talking about is what's going to happen at the end of the end time, where Jesus is going to come back. Israel's going to be judged. The wickedness of Israel is going to be judged. The wickedness of the nation. And notice he says he will gather all the nations against Jerusalem. All right, guys, don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP, the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comment section below. All comments are welcome. And I will see you in the next study.